August 8, 1944. A hedgerow south of Cintheaux. The dust has not yet settled on a burning Tiger tank beside the road to Caen. Inside, the body of Michael Wittmann, the most celebrated German tank commander of the war, is still at his station. Minutes earlier, he had been moving across open farmland with 4 other Tigers, confident that no Allied tank in range could hurt him. He was wrong. Something, a Sherman Firefly gun from a British flank, or possibly a rocket from a circling Typhoon, had punched through the Tiger's turret or ignited its ammunition. Historians still debate which one. What is not debated is this. The most famous Tiger ace in the German army was dead. His tank, the symbol of German armored supremacy, was a burning shell. And the Allied unit that killed him was made up of tanks he had been taught to consider inferior in every way. This is the story of the Tiger tank. For 80 years, the Tiger has been sold as the finest tank of the Second World War, a war of German aggression that would claim over 70 million lives. Walk into any bookstore, open any documentary, scroll any military history forum. The story is always the same. The Tiger was a masterpiece of German engineering. Its 88mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at long range. Its frontal armor was extremely difficult to penetrate from the front. One Tiger, the story goes, was worth several Shermans or several T-34s or several Cromwells. The myth is everywhere. It appears in Hollywood films. It shapes video games. It defines how most people understand armored warfare in that conflict. And the myth has a real kernel of truth inside it. In a direct tank duel on open ground at long range, with full fuel and a working transmission, the Tiger was one of the most dangerous armored vehicles on any battlefield in Europe. But here is what actually happened. If you are finding this interesting, hit subscribe. More deep dives like this are coming. The Tiger entered combat in September 1942 near Leningrad, and the debut went poorly. The ground was swampy. The early production models had teething problems, especially in the transmission and final drive. Several of the first Tigers committed to action broke down or bogged down before they could engage effectively, and at least one was eventually captured largely intact by Soviet forces the following January. The Kubinka Proving Ground studied that captured Tiger in detail. The lesson for the Germans was clear. Their new heavy tank was powerful, but it had been rushed into service, and the infrastructure to support it was not ready. That infrastructure problem would shape the Tiger's entire career. The tank weighed 57 tons. That did not mean most European bridges collapsed under it. Engineer units bridged rivers and reinforced crossings constantly. But it did mean that a Tiger could not use many civilian bridges without inspection or reinforcement, and that rail transport required swapping the wide battle tracks for narrower transport tracks, a labor-intensive procedure that ate hours on every move. Germany did field recovery vehicles. The SDKFZ-9 FAMO half-track was a workhorse of the Panzer Arm, and later in the war the Berge Panther, a turretless Panther chassis, was produced as a heavy recovery vehicle. The issue was never total absence. The issue was sufficiency. A Tiger in trouble often needed 2 or 3 FAMOs working together, or a Berge Panther that simply was not available in the quantities the field units needed. When no recovery vehicle was at hand, the practical solution was to use another Tiger to tow the disabled one, which meant 2 tanks out of the fight instead of 1, which meant the unit's combat power dropped every time a single tank had a mechanical problem. The mathematics of production tell the larger story. German factories built around 1,347 Tiger ones over the course of the war. Soviet factories built tens of thousands of T-34s. American factories produced roughly 49,000 Shermans. These raw numbers do not capture every difference between the tanks, doctrine, crew training, and battlefield role all mattered, but they do establish the strategic context. The Tiger was never going to appear in the numbers required to decide a continental war. And Heinz Guderian, the father of German armored warfare, knew it. Across 1943 and 1944, Guderian repeatedly argued for simpler, cheaper, more numerous tanks, the Panzer IV above all, as the backbone of the Panzer Force. A Tiger cost roughly 2.5 times as much to build as a Panzer IV, and consume far more raw material and skilled labor. The exact economic ratio is debated by historians, but the direction of the argument is not. Guderian believed Germany was pouring scarce industrial capacity into a small number of expensive tanks when it needed a large number of reliable ones. He was largely ignored. In the Normandy hedgerows in June and July 1944, the Tiger's weaknesses became visible in a new way. The terrain favored short-range ambushes, where the tank's long-range gun gave it less advantage than on the steppe. The narrow, sunken roads forced tanks into single file, where a disabled vehicle blocked everything behind it. Allied fighter-bombers ranged freely over the roads by day, and while the actual kill rate of aircraft against tanks was lower than post-war legends claimed, the threat forced German units to move mostly at night. Every breakdown on a night road, every vehicle stranded at dawn, was a vulnerability. And the loss of Wittmann on August 8 was emblematic rather than exceptional. The precise cause of his death is still argued. What is certain is that a Tiger moving in the open in Normandy, without sufficient infantry and air cover, was no longer master of the battlefield. The war had moved past the duel. Now consider the specific engagements. Villers-Bocage, June 13, 1944. Wittmann, in a single Tiger, ambushed the lead elements of the British 7th Armored Division's advance and destroyed more than a dozen vehicles in a matter of minutes, a mixture of tanks, half-tracks, and scout carriers. This is the engagement that built the Tiger legend, and it deserves the reputation as a remarkable piece of tactical opportunism. What the legend usually leaves out is what followed. Later that same day, Wittmann's own Tiger was disabled by a British anti-tank gun, and he escaped on foot. In the hours and days after the initial ambush, the broader German force, including other Tigers from the same heavy tank battalion, took further losses in the fighting around the town. Villers-Bocage was not the clean victory the myth suggests. It was a stunning opening blow, followed by a confused and costly battle for the Germans as well as the British. Kursk, July 1943. The largest tank battle in history. German commanders expected the Tigers and the new Panthers to cut through Soviet armor decisively. The Panthers, rushed into service too early, suffered severe mechanical failures on the approach march. Many broke down, though many others reached the battlefield and inflicted heavy losses. The Tigers, fewer in number and more mature in design, performed better mechanically and destroyed a significant number of Soviet tanks. And they still failed to achieve the breakthrough. Soviet tank commander Pavel Rotmistrov and his superiors concluded afterward that the way to beat German heavy armor was not to match it vehicle for vehicle, but to absorb its attacks with defense in depth and counterattack in mass. At Prokhorovka, Soviet crews closed the range aggressively, not because the Tiger's guns stopped being effective at 50 meters, it remained lethal, but because close range reduced the advantage the German optics and ballistics gave at long distance, and because a moving melee was harder for the slower traversing Tiger turret to manage. Doctrine and numbers, more than the engineering of any single tank, decided the battle. Now listen to the German soldiers themselves. Otto Carius, one of the top Tiger aces of the war, recorded in his memoir that the tank was formidable in combat but demanding everywhere else, and that crews spent an enormous share of their time nursing transmissions, final drives, and running gear. He preferred the tank in a prepared ambush over a long road march, and his writing is full of frustration with the logistical burden of heavy armor. Other veterans of the Tiger battalions described a similar pattern in their post-war accounts. The tank was loved in a firing position and feared on a long move. No single precise maintenance ratio applies across every unit and every year, but the consistent testimony from German mechanics and crews is that the Tiger demanded significantly more upkeep per combat hour than the Panzer IV. That cost, multiplied across every unit, every front, and every season, was part of what wore the Panzer force down. The Soviet view from Kubinka adds another angle. After capturing and testing the Tiger, Soviet engineers concluded that the tank was extremely dangerous in direct combat and also difficult to produce, transport, and sustain in the numbers that would have made it decisive. Their recommendation, broadly speaking, was to continue prioritizing the T-34 and its upgrades rather than chase a Soviet equivalent of the Tiger. Soviet heavy tank programs continued in parallel, but the core of the tank force remained the cheaper, more numerous, more easily produced medium. Stalin and his planners understood that winning a war with armor meant winning with the tank you could build in quantity, not the tank you wished you had in theory. Now, the honest assessment. The Tiger was not a bad tank. Inside its ideal conditions, flat or rolling ground, long sight lines, prepared positions, full fuel and ammunition, it was one of the most dangerous armored vehicles of the war. Allied tank crews genuinely feared it, and that fear shaped Allied tactics in ways that sometimes slowed their advance. The 88mm gun was an excellent weapon. The armor was heavy and well made. The optics and the fire control were of high quality. When Tigers fought well-led engagements in favorable terrain, the kill-to-loss ratios in those engagements were often lopsidedly in their favor, but ratios inside battles are not the same as strategic success. The Sherman was inferior to the Tiger in a one-on-one duel in many measures, and the Sherman was also produced in huge numbers, shipped across oceans, able to cross most European bridges without special preparation, and maintainable with a relatively modest toolkit. The T-34 lacked the Tiger's refinement and was also produced in enormous quantities by factories that had been evacuated deep into the Soviet interior, and it kept running in conditions that punished the heavier German machines. The Sherman and the T-34 won the war. The Tiger did not. Calling the Tiger fragile would be wrong. The armor was anything but. The accurate word is unreliable, and unreliability at that scale is a strategic problem, not a detail. So return to that dusty road near Cintheaux. The most famous Tiger ace in the German army lies dead inside a burning tank. The gun that frightened Allied crews across two fronts did not save him. The armor that shrugged off medium-caliber rounds did not save him either, because the war in 1944 was not decided by individual duels. It was decided by which side could put more tanks on the road the next morning, and the morning after that. The Tiger's real lesson is that a weapon is only as strong as the industry that produces it, the logistics that sustain it, and the doctrine that employs it. No modern army has copied the Tiger's path. The Americans built the Abrams with sustainment and crew survivability at the heart of the design. West Germany, when it built the Leopard, deliberately emphasized mobility and serviceability over absolute weight of armor. Soviet and later Russian design kept faith with mass production and field repair. Every serious armor program since has bent toward reliability and producibility, not pure single-tank lethality. That is the lesson of the Tiger. A weapon is only as good as the logistics that sustain it, the industry that produces it, and the doctrine that employs it. And that is why, 8 decades later, the design philosophy that won the war, mass, reliability, and serviceability, still shapes the tanks that roll off modern production lines. The Tiger remains a fascination. It does not remain a model.